A very proud alumna of SF State, class of 1993. In case there are any of my fellow 1993ers out there, let me know. Let's chat, talk about the good old times. We are thrilled to be able to bring you this type of content, and based on your incredible response, we plan to keep on offering these kinds of classes. The incredible events and alumni relations team are the people who truly deserve all the credit. So thank you to Ken Maeshiro for creating and planning tonight's program, and to Charlene Del Muro and Marciana Flores for making sure everything is going to run perfectly. Also, save the date. Our next class is going to be on January 18th, and we're going to be hosting a workshop led also by Sybil in honor of the Lunar New Year. Sybil is going to teach us how to make perfect pork buns and sticky rice to welcome in the Year of the Rabbit. Okay, let's get to know each other maybe a little bit. Is there anyone joining us for the first time tonight? Let us know, or if you've come to these classes before. We like to see people come back again, but we like, to know when people are coming by for the first time. And where are you zooming in from? I'm in San Francisco. I'm actually on campus today, and I'm sure it's dark everywhere, but it's already dark out. It's been a little chilly here in San Francisco, so maybe some people in warmer climates can send us a little warmth, and I'm sure that people who are in colder climates would be happy with 60-degree weather. So let's see, anyone letting us know where they're coming from? Let us know. I'm going to keep an eye on that. As we close out 2022, I wanted to just let you know just a few highlights and successes that are coming from the campus. We received complete funding for a new 6-story student housing building, which will be built on the site of the current West Campus Green. The construction is going to begin in 2023, and it's going to include 750 new beds and 4 floors of student housing centered around social lounges and study spaces. Accompanying the student housing will be dining hall, offices, and meeting space, as well as it's going to become the home of the second floor is going to become home of our new student health center. I think everyone who's been here has maybe visited where it is currently underground. We also, SF State was named one of only 43 Fulbright HSI leaders for the second year in a row by the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs. This designation recognizes the noteworthy engagement that selected Hispanic serving institutions, the HSI, have achieved with the Fulbright program, the U.S. government's flagship international education exchange program. In October, we installed the final steel beam for the new Science and Engineering Innovation Center. This 125,000 square foot building is slated to open in 2024, and it will be the new home of the School of Engineering and the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry. In October, we also inducted our latest members of the Alumni Hall of Fame, including our Alumni of the Year, Kimberly Brandon and Michael Richmond. Kimberly led a successful career as a wealth manager at Morgan Stanley, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America. She's also dedicated her life to public service and was the first African-American woman to serve on the SF Port Commission. She's on several boards, including the SF State Foundation. Michael Richmond is the co-founder, president, and CEO of NextCure, a biopharmaceutical company founded in 2015, which is committed to discovering and developing immune medicines to treat cancer and other immune-related diseases. Our other inductees were Gulshan Kumar, partner and vice president of sales at PATH, which is a reusable water bottle company. You'll see those all around everywhere in the United States, including our co-branded bottle that we made with them all around campus. We also inducted Dalia Seja, who's the marketing director for her family's winery, Seja Vineyards, one of the few Latino-owned wineries in the Napa and Sonoma Valleys. Excuse me, and the co-founders of SF Sketchfest, David Owen, Cole Stratton, and Janet Barney. SF Sketchfest is going to celebrate its 20th anniversary this January. They have also led successful careers in the entertainment industry, ranging from festival curation to starring in television shows and hosting podcasts. I'm going to drink a little of the water from our alum right now. Okay, let's get on with this show. California native Sybil Yang is an associate professor at the Department of Hospitality and Tourism Management within the Lamb Family College of Business. She earned her Bachelor of Science degree at the Haas School of Business at UC Berkeley. She earned her MBA, MMH, and PhD at Cornell University. And her research is focused on evaluating the efficiency of restaurant menu board, and wine label design tactics. On a more theoretical level, Sybil's research interests are consumer behavior and behavioral economics. Her design and pricing recommendations have been directly implemented on hundreds of menus across the United States. And apart from her menu design research, Sybil's current work also explores consumer decision making and how decoys can be used to change consumer behavior. Sybil's work has been reported on and featured in, I'm just going to name two because the list is long, the Wall Street Journal and Women's Health magazine. Prior to her current position at SF State, Sybil taught menu development at the Culinary Institute of America, was a baker at Artisan Bread Bakery Arizmendi, and a chef at Wente Vineyards. Before finding her professional passion for the food and beverage industry, Sybil was a boring investment banker. I swear those are not my words. That was given to me. With Solomon Smith Barney's Media and Telecommunications Group, and an analyst for the venture capital firm Skipstone Ventures. Her hobbies, which she's not just doing that, are, some simple little things like mountaineering, rock climbing, sailing, springboard diving, and luckily for us, baking. So tonight, she is going to be guiding us through how to make the perfect pecan pie, biscuits, and mac and cheese. We know you're going to have questions, so please put those in the Q&A section. And you should have all received the recipes in advance. We can have a link in the chat that will take you to them, because we know that you'll want those directions to follow along tonight, or to try and make these dishes another time, and then again and again. So everyone, please help me welcome Dr. Professor Chef Sybil Yang.
Hey, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, Nicole. Hopefully the sound is okay. Yeah, sounds reasonable. Okay, great.
Sounds great.
I'm just going to give one quick announcement because I have to plug it. I head up the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Initiative out of the Lamb Family College of Business, and I just wanted to put it on you guys' radar that we're going to be hosting our Entrepreneurship Symposium coming up in April of 2023. Hope to see you guys there. At that symposium, we will also be hosting our pitch competition, where we will be giving out $10,000 in startup grant funding for San Francisco State students. So please be on the lookout for an email on that event. That being said, let's get started with all the food, all the carbs that we're going to be making today. We're going to go a little bit out of order just because we're going to be juggling some of the baking and the cooling. So I'm going to start with the pecan pie, and I'm going to start with a already baked crust. And we're going to be making this crust today, but I like to roll out the crust, freeze it, and then pre-bake the crust before putting the filling in. One of my pet peeves in this world is soggy bottom crusts. And one of the ways you prevent soggy bottom crust is to pre-bake the crust first. So this crust, I don't know if you can hear it. Yeah, is already baked through. It's lightly golden brown. And to this, we're going to go ahead and start that pecan pie filling. I have here dark corn syrup. You can use light corn syrup. It's not going to taste as good, but I've also seen some recipes where people don't want to use corn syrup. I would say, it's the holidays, kind of suck it up. Just don't do it all too often, but there really is not a good substitute for dark corn syrup, unfortunately, for pecan pies. Super simple recipe. All you're going to do is literally add in all the liquids together. So for the liquids, we have light brown sugar, 1/3 of a cup. Sugar in baking and pastry is considered a liquid just because it's very hygroscopic and likes to hold on to water content. So light brown sugar, adding in 3 tablespoons of melted unsalted butter into here. And of course, the bourbon. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my little holiday edition Maker's Mark over here. This is how often I go ahead and use my bourbon. You can be a little generous with this. The recipe says 2 tablespoons. You can just be a little generous with that 2 tablespoons. Okay. And most of the vanilla extract that people use is an alcohol-based vanilla extract. And so if you didn't want the vanilla-ness in there and you wanted to add in even more bourbon, you can sub the vanilla extract for the bourbon. But I don't think I'm going to go that extreme this time around. And I will go ahead and use some vanilla extract in there as well. So literally all the liquid ingredients into one, including the eggs. I'm going to go ahead and crack the eggs one at a time. These are from backyard chickens. Hopefully during the pandemic, some of you guys had a chance to get some backyard chickens as well. I want to say Belgium, a few researchers out of Belgium just released a study saying that if everybody had backyard chickens, we could essentially get rid of the farmed egg industry and cut CO2 emissions, just because chickens love leftovers and kitchen scraps. All liquids. Just going to stir them all together here. And I hate doing dishes, so I'm not going to use an extra whisk here. I'm just going to go ahead and use the spatula.
So we had a first question. Sorry. Just, she said, Jeff was asking if you buy light rather than dark brown sugar.
For a pecan pie, it doesn't really matter because so much of the flavoring is coming from like molassesy toned flavors that the dark brown sugar just has more molasses in it than the light brown sugar. So for the purposes of this, it's okay either way. The one that I used in particular is light brown sugar, just because it's more versatile inside the kitchen. Dark brown sugar just really has a deeper molasses flavor to it. So it just depends on whether or not you're a fan of molasses. Yeah. Okay. I have a little bit of butteriness going on. I'm going to try to smash them up. But butter's going to go ahead and melt. And this is really all there is to it in terms of making kind of that filling for pecan pie. Your par-baked shell, and literally just dump it all in.
Trisha's asking, do we need, it doesn't look maybe like you did, but melt the butter, do you need to melt the butter in the microwave, or should it be?
Yeah, so melt the butter. What I usually end up doing, because you have to preheat the oven anyways, is I'll stick like a Pyrex-ish type of glass, or in my case, like a little metal tin with the butter, and just stick it inside the oven while it preheats. And by the time the oven is preheated, the butter is already melted and ready to go.
Oh, that's a great tip.
Yeah. Oh, you know something? I literally forgot. I'll just stir it in here. Is the salt. A little bit of salt, salty goodness.
And Sybil, we also have a question about using unsalted versus salted butter.
Yeah, unsalted butter, always inside a recipe. And the reason why recipe writers do that is manufacturers will have different levels of salt inside their salted butter. So for standardized recipes, people always go with unsalted butter, because then you can control and add however much salt is supposed to be added. I will also add to that in recipes, when they ask you to put salt in, and it's a volumetric measure like teaspoons and tablespoons and such, use kosher salt. Don't use iodized table salt unless you know the weight of the salt. So oftentimes people add in the salt according to the recipe, and they're using iodized salt, and iodized salt, the pieces are, the grains are smaller than that kosher salt. And so by weight, you've actually added in a lot more salt than the recipe may have called for. So one of the easiest ways to get around that is literally just to use kosher salt, because then you'd be under salting and then adjust the salt later on. Okay, all the liquids into the pie dish, and literally all the pecans. I go heavy on the pecans. The range inside the recipe is 2 to 3 cups, and this is what 3 cups of pecans is going to look like. And so I don't know, I'm as much of a fan of Costco as the next person, but when you cut into a Costco pecan pie, what you find is like all the pecans have floated up to the top, and then you just kind of get custardiness on the bottom. With 3 cups, you will get pecans all the way on through. I cheaped out a little bit over here, and I used kind of pecan halves and pieces. If you want to go for the full, like, I think pecans are running like $15 a pound right now or so, is you can literally put chopped pecans, which are a lot cheaper, on the bottom, and then hand lay out all the pecans, whole pecan pieces, like on the top. And that's how you get like the beautiful looking spirals and concentric circles. But this then goes, you don't need to be like, super delicate with it or anything like that. Prepared pie into the oven, 375 degrees.
You know what I appreciated, Sybil, is that, even though you forgot the salt, you put it in. I think, we have a question for someone, but I do like that, that people know that when you're baking, few things are unrecoverable, that you don't need to be intimidated when you've forgotten something as soon as you realize it. How often do you think you can I make her to kind of recover than people think?
I make all sorts of mistakes all the time, and it really depends on what the mistake is. But yeah, what is it like? I recently fixed something on my car, and I had a couple of screws left over afterwards, and I was like, something is not a good auto repair unless you have like parts left over.
That's another class. That's another class. I'm not gonna.
Okay.
Yes. One question about that was, when par baking the crust, is it important to blind bake? She said,
yes,
and that gets the bottom cooked nicely, but then my edges tend to burn because they're exposed in the oven for so long.
Yes, and that's what we're going to go ahead and talk about in just a little bit. But so I went ahead and refrigerated some of the dough. So I made a 2 times batch of the dough recipe that we're actually going to do in just a bit. But I want to show you guys how to roll this dough out first. So this is straight from the fridge, and it's been sitting in the fridge for a while, and it's relatively cold. I am literally just going to stick it in my flour container so that it's nice and floured on both sides. I'm going to knock some of it down. This pie dough recipe, don't worry about being generous with the flour. Just work quickly though. So when you roll out your pie dough, I just happen to have a rolling pin this time around, is don't drop all of your weight into the pie dough, but go from the center out and don't roll off the edge like that. That's a recipe for smearing the dough into the bench. So roll from the center out a little bit. Don't worry if there are cracks. You can just kind of push back. And
someone was asking the temperature. I think it was 375. Is that correct?
375 on the pecan pie. Yeah. And you'll notice that I am just habitually going to make sure that the dough can still move around. So I will slide the dough and sprinkle a little bit more bottom and top, and continue.
Janet's asking that there was vodka in the list of ingredients for the pie crust.
Yes.
And add to the end result.
Yeah. So pie dough, it's essentially the same as the biscuit dough that we're going to be making in just a bit, only with water to kind of bring all the crumbs together. But the problem with water is water will hydrate gluten, And once gluten gets hydrated, the gluten can then kind of be formed and really exercised and get tougher. The reason why a lot of people add vodka to the pie dough crust is alcohol doesn't hydrate gluten. And so the gluten won't be exercised if it's been hydrated with vodka. So it's a liquid that helps to bring all the dough pieces together. And so you can form an actual dough, but the gluten won't be activated. So you'll notice that inside the recipe, there's a portion of alcohol, of vodka, which I want to say is like 60% water anyways, 40% alcohol, and then water. So the crust will still have some water inside of it, but the alcohol will evaporate off as it bakes. But it's enough liquid so that you have a dough that you can actually work with that won't crumble in your hands. Okay, so finished rolling out my pie crust, and I'm just going to make sure that the cracks don't quite appear. And I'm going to go ahead and put it in a pie crust. I use a very deep dish pie dish here, just because I like a lot of filling in my pies. You can use a shallower version on this, and you'll notice that this is a little smaller than than this pie dish here. This pie dough is very, very generous. It can fit not only like a larger pie dish, but also a deep pie dish as well. So if you've worked fast enough, the dough is still cold enough where it will hold and you can transfer it onto the pie dish. If you find that it's a little difficult, you can roll the pie dough onto a rolling pin and then roll it back out onto your pie dish like this. When you set your pie crust, make sure the edges are straight down and that you get into the corner, the very corner of the pie dish. So push the dough into the corners, okay, and try to pull the edge out around the edge. Okay. So here's one thing where people are like, oh, but I've made my own pie dough before and I stick it in the oven and it just completely shrinks and I have this just like cracker in the middle of the pie dish. It's no longer a dish anymore. There are a couple things you can do. One, somebody had asked about blind baking. We're going to do that. The other thing that you can go ahead and do is also make sure that the dough curls up over the edge of the pie dish. That way it can't pull off. It can't pull away from the edge of the dish because it is literally locked over the edge of the dish. So I'm just going to go through and make sure that the edge of the pie dough is over the edge of the pie dish as well. Okay.
Never done
Don't
that.
worry,
That's
we're
a great
gonna
idea.
we're gonna make the edge look nice. If you make tarts, and I'll just add this in here. If you make tarts, meaning you use one of these things, this pie crust can also be used like in a pinch to fill in a tart crust. And you would let the edge go all the way over the tart crust like this. And then after you bake it, all you have to do is take a knife and then cut around the edge. And then you can have a perfectly even edge to the tart crust also.
Jennifer is asking, she says, I don't have a marble or a wood surface to roll pie crust. I only have countertop. So she uses wax paper under the dough and flour on it. And she's wondering if you had any other ideas, I guess, or maybe surfaces in a pinch.
If your countertop is smooth, so if it's like quartz or if it's marble, just as long as it's not tile where you get like the grout seams or anything like that, but quartz works great for doing this. And usually when working on countertops, I'm pretty brutal, and that's why I'm on a wood bench like this. I'm pretty brutal and I just use a metal scraper for it. But if you have like nice countertops and you don't want to like take to it with something metal, you can also use a rubber spatula like this and then go ahead and scrape with your rubber spatula like this as well. Okay, I'm going to just dip my hands into the flour, make sure that my hands are not sticky. And the edge that I'm going to crimp on this, I'm going to do this. So, you know, thumb and pointer finger, and I'm going to take my other pointer finger and then do this kind of like a zipper, like type motion to the edge. Just to, I don't know if you guys can see the crimped edge like this. You guys can see like that. And I'm just going to go through. If my fingers start feeling a bit like moist from the moisture in the crust, it's kind of lost that floury protective coating, I'll just, you know, flour them up a little bit more. But that's one way to get a very even crimp to the edge. Million different ways to crimp an edge. Crimped edges, not really key to the flavor of a pie, but you know, people like things that look kind of nice. So that's literally all you would go ahead and do. At this point, you could have made the pie dough weeks ahead of time if you wanted to. Rolled it out, put it into a pie pan like this, and then stick it in the freezer, like stick it in a plastic bag and stick it in the freezer. You want your pie crust to be completely frozen when it goes into the oven. And again, freezing it and giving that rest time while it freezes allows for the glutens to relax and also helps to prevent the crust from like sucking back in and shrinking while it's inside the oven. So let's pretend that this went into the freezer and then I just have taken it out of the freezer. This is blind baking. And what blind baking does is we put pressure on the crust so that it doesn't try to puff up and rise and shrink in. And how we do that is we line a pie crust. This just happens to be parchment paper that I've cut into a circle. And you can buy these, I don't know, Sur La Table, Williams Sonoma, Amazon, anywhere, but these are pie weights. They're essentially like clay balls. People use beans. I've used pinto beans for the longest time and just keep on reusing them, but just something heavy. I've also seen people use like nuts from Nuts and Bolts. The idea is you just want something heavy that you can reuse over and over again. You just make sure that you line the pie crust with something so that, you know, the weights don't sink into the crust itself. That's another reason why you want the crust to be frozen, is if the weights are too heavy, they may actually dimple and dent the bottom of your crust also. So you would just go ahead and bake this in the oven, and you wait until the crust is par baked. So it gets a light golden brown color. Take it out of the oven, put the weight out of the pie, and then continue baking so that the bottom can now go ahead and set. Now for the question of, but you know, when I par bake and blind bake my crust, the edges might get too dark. These things exist. These are just pie edge covers. This is a silicone one. They sell aluminum ones also, but the idea is you literally just cover the edge of your pie crust with silicone and then stick this in the oven. And that kind of extra layer will protect the edge of the crust. If you don't have one of these, you can also use aluminum foil. And again, make sure the pie crust is frozen or it's already par baked before putting the aluminum foil on, because this is pretty soft right now. The edges of the aluminum foil will just poke into it and then crumble everything up. So make sure you're working with a frozen pie crust. Pie crust is one of those great things where it freezes so well. So might as well make all of your pie dough, set it into a pie dish or, you know, a reusable pie tin, the metal ones, and then plastic wrap, stick it inside the freezer for whenever you need to use it. So that's how to roll out the pie dough. Now that we're just kind of moving backwards in time, let me show you how to make the pie dough. Okay, the easiest way to make this pie dough is if you have a Cuisinart or some form of food processor. If you have a food processor, literally stick all the ingredients into the food processor except for the water and the vodka. Pulse until the mixture looks like polenta, like dry polenta. So like a coarse, very coarse sand.
Okay.
Then drizzle in the vodka and the water until it's completely combined. Otherwise, flour, put all your ingredients into a bowl. So your butter, cold butter. And this I just kind of cut into cubes and stuck inside the freezer. And then when I'm ready to use it, I brought it out of the freezer. So this is literally just cubes of butter, right? In flour. I'm gonna go ahead and where is it? Add in.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, as you're adding those in, we have a couple other questions. One, it might be a little, how long to bake the blind, how long to blind bake the shell?
Yeah. Until it's a light golden brown. And
Okay.
It really depends on what type of pie you're also making. The reason why you want to blind bake the pie crust is the crust will bake at a slightly different temperature than whatever your filling is. So if you're making kind of like a no-bake pie where you kind of have a pudding filling in it, then you're going to want your like blind baked crust to be pretty much 100% done when you pull it out, because then you're going to put a cold pudding into it and then top it with whipped cream, and it's not going to go back to the oven. For something like a lemon meringue pie where the filling is already cooked, when it goes in, I take it, pretty much 80% of the darkness of that crust. But it's really a matter of how toasty you like your crust to be. But for most people out there, I say most people underbake their crusts. So take it a little bit more golden than you might be comfortable with. And you will find that the bottom crust, the bottom of your pie, will never overbake with like filling inside of it. A lot of pecan pie recipes, you're actually going to find, say, because the filling is raw, when you pour it in, they don't blind bake the crust. I blind bake the crust anyways, because I hate anything doughy on the bottom of that pie. Yeah.
Well, that might feed into this question, which is, can you talk about the difference between an aluminum versus a glass pie plate?
Yeah.
Glass.
Yeah, I like the glass ones just because I can see the color of the crust through the glass on the bottom. Glass is also a bit more insulating than pie tins. So be very careful if you're baking in a pie tin. You kind of have to get used to your pie tin also in terms of like how quickly it bakes. The metal pie tins will bake faster.
Okay.
They will bake faster, and you will not be able to see the doneness level on the bottom of the pie crust, especially if there's a filling inside of it. So I like the glass just because I can visually see.
That is such a good point.
Yeah. Okay.
The last question I know you forget, Tiffany, she said it's raining where she's at. And so she, I think this maybe has to do with the amount of moisture, but why she's asking this, in the air. So it's raining here and I only used half the water vodka mix. I'm just laughing because that means that, now you have a vodka soda left for yourself to drink. But does I assume like that the temperature, the moisture in the air really plays into how much you're going to add when you're making a pie crust, do you think? Or
no, you don't have to really worry too much about that. The point of the liquid is just to make sure that you have a moist enough mixture so that the dough can hold together on its own.
Okay.
I've made pie crusts where I've just left the water out and have used straight vodka, and that turns out just fine. Also, classical recipes did not use vodka at all and just used water also. But the idea is you want to drizzle in the liquid at the end and only add enough liquid to the point where you can gather all the like, I guess, crumbles together.
Okay.
Also notice that I have crumbles of all different sizes here. I don't know, the lighting's a little too exposed, but I have wads of butter, maybe the size of a large pea, all the way down to, you know, wet sand type of sizes of butter, and that's fine. The big blobs of butter, they'll melt away, and then you'll end up with extra flakiness. So don't worry about, you know, blobs of butter, even like this size or so. That will just lend to a flakier crust. So at this point, I'm going to pour my alcohol in with my water, and I'm going to start to slowly drizzle in. So you really want to work fast at this point, because the mixture has been out for a bit. And your hands have probably started to warm up the butter a bit also. So you don't want the butter to melt too much. And it pretty much cleans up the bowl. And now I'm just gonna use this to clean up the bowl. Knock this out. Go ahead and use the rest of this for the pie crust. And you don't want to knead this pie dough. I'm gonna get some flour on my hands, and I'm just gonna gather it. Notice I didn't use up all the liquid. Go by the feel of the dough. You just want the dough to be wet enough where you can gather all the pieces back in.
That's great.
And because everybody's flour will have a different hydration level also, so it may or may not, you know, need all that water either.
Got it.
Okay, I'm just gonna clean off my hands. Okay. And again, clean off the bench. Okay. And a circle like this, you can wrap in saran wrap. You can stick in a Ziploc bag of some sort. But this is what you would stick in your fridge, or you would stick inside your freezer, right? And this is very much like what we rolled out for our pie dough. So that's pie dough.
Great.
Yeah.
A couple people are asking if you have a preferred brand of flour that you like.
It depends. So if you're making bread, King Arthur's bread flours are always really good. We're going to be making biscuits in a bit. Classically, Southerners will tell you white lily is the best flour to use for biscuits because it's a very soft flour. There's very little gluten in white lily. But for something like pie dough, you know, whatever all-purpose flour you're happy with, unbleached gives you kind of a more nutty flavor. You can also use, I would sub, if you really wanted to use whole wheat in there, I'd sub maybe up to maybe a third of a cup of the all-purpose flour with whole wheat. That's about as high as I would go if you're going to sub whole wheat flour onto it. But, you know, feel free to use artisan flours also if you want to, like from artisan mills or so, but no big preference on the flours. I try to go organic because I'm already eating all this carb, might as well feel a little bit better about it.
We have somebody who's very jealous of your wooden surface, of your butcher block there, I think, that looks like.
Oh my God. So I recently did the kitchen and I wanted a big ass island, right? And this is an awkward size. So you guys are only seeing a corner of this. This is like 5 foot by 5 foot. And nobody sells that for a butcher block surface. So this is actually a tabletop that has been joined together. It's an IKEA tabletop that's been cut and then joined in the middle. So I just was very lucky that this was sitting in my basement.
Oh.
So yeah.
Okay. Someone was asking, I'm sorry, someone was asking about a gluten-free flour. Does that change? Is that just like a new recipe altogether?
That would have to be a new recipe altogether.
Okay.
I am not as versed in that. I would say it's probably easier to make gluten-free biscuits and pie doughs than it would be for bread, because you don't want gluten development when you're making pie doughs and biscuits. So you're kind of already one up by using a gluten-free flour in that sense. But I haven't played enough with gluten-free flours to know what proportions or what type of gluten-free flour to use, but it's something to look into.
Right. And last question, any preferred,
Yeah.
do you have a preferred vodka for cooking or drinking, whichever? They didn't specify.
So I'm going to tell you, I don't like vodka. Vodka, I just can't drink it. This is the vodka that I use. It was the cheapest handle of vodka that I could find, and it literally lives underneath my sink because it's used only for pie dough and for cleaning fluid. That's what I use my vodka for.
Perfect.
Drinking alcohol, it's usually the brown goods of some sort. Lots and lots of scotch and whiskey and bourbon and wine. So, yeah. Okay, I'm going to move on to the biscuits for now. And biscuits, much the same technique as we used for the pie dough. Super cold butter. The method is, we call it the cutting method, where we cut the fat into the flours. We go ahead, and this flour was pulled out of the refrigerator, so the flour is nice and cold also. We go ahead and put all the flour in there, all the dry ingredients together. So baking powder, make sure your baking powder is not old, that it's still active. Your sugar and your salt in there. Note, biscuits are essentially savory scones. So if you want to turn this into a scone recipe, I would say up the sugar content to about 1/4 cup of sugar to this, and then you essentially have scones. Same thing. Okay, now the butter. And again, this is cut into tiny little cubes and then frozen, and then bring it back out. You want everything to be cold, 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 cold. And same method, you literally just pinch and work that butter into the flour until you kind of have that polenta, wet sand, small granules. There are dough cutters or pastry cutters you can use. You can also do this in a Cuisinart if you wanted to. Again, same method. Old school days, people would use like 2 knives or forks and literally cut the butter in that way. You get a finger workout this way if you kind of pinch the butter into the flour. If you have kids, this is a messy kid activity also, but they really can't do damage to this. So feel free to assign them this task. Otherwise, it's like massaging the butter into the flour. And you just keep on going until it doesn't need to be uniform, just kind of like the pie dough. If you have pockets of butter in there, the pockets of butter will just help to create increased flakiness. And the liquid, instead of the vodka and the water, for the biscuits, we're going to go classic with some buttermilk here.
A couple people asked, you mentioned making sure your baking powder is active. Is there a way to test that, or do you kind of just have to go by maybe what the date on the container says? I know I throw away probably more baking powder than I wish they would come in kind of
yeah
packages of 2 tablespoons or something. Yeah.
Really isn't a way. You wanted to get super creative. What comes to mind is an episode of The Simpsons where Principal Skinner gets like caught underneath a mountain of stuff inside his garage, and then he fills a little balloon with baking soda and squeezes lemon juice into it, and then he fills up the balloon with like CO2, like from the chemical reaction. I guess you can kind of do that. Baking powder, your traditional baking powder is double acting baking powder. The double action is, the first action is when the baking powder gets wet. The baking powder gets wet and the acid and the base inside the baking soda reacts together, and then you get CO2. That's your first action on the baking powder. The second action is there's usually some other leavening agent that's catalyzed by heat. So that second burst that you get inside the oven is when it hits the oven. So I guess you could probably add a little bit of water to it and hydrate your baking powder and see if like CO2 comes off of it, but there's no real easy way to see if CO2 is coming off of it. Unless you stick it in a balloon and see if the balloon inflates or so, but that seems more trouble than it's really worth. Just bake more stuff.
Get yourself some fresh baking powder.
Okay, so this starts looking like maybe Bisquick. I don't know if, does that help the color tone?
Yeah.
That crumbly kind of texture you're looking for. Again, it's not completely uniform. Go ahead and pour the buttermilk into here, nice and slow. Doesn't matter low fat or like full fat buttermilk. Combine. And again, with liquid, once the liquid goes in, you want to be very careful because you don't want gluten formation. So we want to be somewhat gentle with it at this point. If you have a Cuisinart, right, this is the point where you use the chute in the lid of your Cuisinart. Nobody ever uses that chute, but this is the time to use that chute.
Is buttermilk just a preference, or someone was asking if you could use regular milk? And then someone was bringing up the great, that you can make buttermilk by adding vinegar to some milk as well. If that's, they're asking if that.
Yeah, works. Not just a preference. So buttermilk or that milk with a little bit of vinegar in it is fine also. Yogurt that's been kind of diluted a little bit is okay also. And the reason why those alternatives are okay, but not straight milk, like straight milk is not okay, is because you want the acid. The acid is going to react with some of the baking soda that's inside the baking powder, and that's going to help give you that lift.
Got it.
Buttermilk just also happens to give you like an extra buttermilky tang to the biscuit. Yeah, I'm gonna wash my hands real quick. Okay. So you have a couple of options here to shape the biscuits. The first one is you can just make drop biscuits, meaning you literally just take a wad and you drop it onto the pan. Scones work really well that way also, like drop scones. The other thing you can go ahead and do is to shape. This is a very wet biscuit dough. I'm gonna go ahead and put some flour down. I love these types of scrapers because you can really get into the bowl. And again, we're not gonna need.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Last time you used all the buttermilk, was that because you needed it all? Do you do this also by feel, kind of like the pie crust?
Also by feel, but this is going to feel a lot wetter.
Okay.
And it's okay if if it's wetter. You would want this wetter than dry. So don't worry about it feeling overly wet, if that makes sense. Okay.
Someone's asking about there, and I think I know the answer to this one, which is you're asking if there's baking soda in baking powder. Yes. I believe there is, right? That causes the second reaction. That's why there's two reactions. Okay.
Yeah. Some baking powders will have different bases as their base, but a lot of them will have baking soda in as at least one of the bases of the baking powder. Okay, so this feels very loose and fluffy inside my hand. I'm not going to compact it down in any way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lightly just make sure everything is lightly floured, so it's not sticking anywhere. Don't be afraid of lightly flouring. Just don't knead the flour into the dough. Is I'm going to lightly press. So I kind of have a rectangle of sorts. I'm going to take a pastry cutter. You can also just use a knife. This is literally a drywall spackle knife. And I'm going to cut it in half and stack it on top of each other like that. I'm going to press back down again. I'm going to make sure that I'm not sticking to the bottom of the board. Okay. I'm going to flatten it out again. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing. Cut in half and stack. And the idea here is I'm making layers. You can probably already start to see some of the layers that I'm making on this, right? And this helps to form the layers of my biscuits also. Again, no heavy rolling pin or so, just using light pressure on with my hands.
What a great tip. I've never seen this done this way. This is fantastic.
And then again, lightly press. Okay. I'm going to do that about 4 times. And this is to get the type of biscuits. Oh my God, there's so many different types of biscuits, but this is the type of biscuit that will puff up high and give you lots of layers. Lightly press. Okay. And they will puff up. So when you cut your biscuit shapes, they're going to look small to you, but then realize they're going to puff up inside the oven also. I'm going to do my last cut here. Okay. And now I'm going to smoosh it down again, lightly, gently, smoosh it down to about 1 inch in height. 3/4 of an inch, you're going to get a pretty flat biscuit, but at about 1 inch, you're doing okay. So let's get myself in. I'm about 1.25 inches. So I'm going to take it down to about 1 inch. Okay. Okay. This is key. Is when you cut, you want to do it fast. You want to be fast and sharp. You don't want to be sawing back and forth, because if you saw, you're going to be smearing the layers together, and then your biscuit's not going to rise evenly. So you want whatever cutting instrument you're going to use to be nice and doused in flour. So almost like cauterized with a little bit of flour. So when it cuts down, it's a nice and dry and even cut. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just one fast motion cuts, and then I'll just go ahead and make some square biscuits. So half, half, half. And I know people like round biscuits, but this saves so much time, and you don't have edges that you then have to re-roll. Every single time you re-roll the dough and combine it in order to make your last biscuit, you're starting to form gluten, and you're going to end up with a tougher biscuit. So square biscuits, right? It is hip to be square in this case. With biscuits, do not bake these yet. You can prep your biscuits up to this point and stick them in the freezer and freeze them until they are freaking rock solid. And then when you're ready to bake them, pull them out about half an hour before you're going to bake them, and then bake them after having been defrosted for about half an hour. If you want to eat your biscuits tonight, stick them inside the freezer for about half an hour, and then pull them out of the freezer and then directly into the oven. So this is going to go into the freezer. It's not going to get baked in this little tiny tray. Well, I guess you can, but they will be touching if they're baked this closely together. A couple of things to think about when you're baking. If you like your biscuits to look like the KFC biscuits, right? It's like a matte colored top. It's not shiny. Just go ahead and bake them like this, like no top to it or anything like that. If you like, I want to say it's Popeyes, where it's like shiny on the top, you're going to want an egg wash on top of the biscuit. What an egg wash is you take the yolk of an egg, 1 tablespoon of water, and you mix it, you whisk it together, and then you brush the top with that egg wash. Just 1 brush over the top, and that egg will get nice and toasty in the oven, and that's how you get the really golden brown shininess. And then once it comes out of the oven, you brush it with a little bit of honey water. And I want to say that's the way that Popeyes does it. But the KFC one is just like dry and flour on the top. So freeze, and these can hold inside the freezer for like weeks or so. Just make sure that you cover them really well.
And any opinion on my mother and grandmother's method, which was as soon as they come out of the oven, you just take a stick of butter to the top of each one and just spread it over.
I would say, man, your family's missing out if they don't crack it open and put a slab of butter into.
Oh, I mean, there's that too. Don't get me wrong. I was asking about the substitution that was an option with the lard. Does that change the taste, the texture?
Yeah. So with biscuits, I would say bacon fat. Totally cool. I would not use margarine. And I'll tell you why. Margarine is an emulsion of oil and water, different types of oils and water, and it's not gonna melt in the same way that butter will, and you won't get the type of rise that you're gonna need from a margarine. So that goes for like the Smart Balance vegan stuff. It's oil and water, and also don't sub oil in this recipe. It's not going to be the same. You need a firm fat. So lard, tallow, butter, whatever flavor profile you're really looking for. I'll just do a real quick explanation. So if this biscuit was not cut straight down, and so you can already kind of tell that the layers started to tilt in that sense, right? This is what happens with the biscuit if you kind of roll it out to 3/4 of an inch instead of an inch. It's still not bad, but it's not nearly as puffy as the one that gets rolled out to like a full inch or so. Yeah. But this is the type of layering that you'll end up getting with the biscuit. Like you have the actual layers in the biscuit, and if you kind of open it up. So this was from a test batch earlier today. Lots of extra biscuits. Okay, biscuits. Oh my God, what do we do, Nicole? It's already 7.
We'll power through. I think people who are mac and cheese lovers are going to stick with us. If you have the time, I'm sure we can.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to switch the other camera then.
Okay.
And that'll take us to the stove, and I'll show you what we're doing.
Perfect.
I'll show you what we're doing. Okay.
I think Kimmy speaks for all of us when she writes, "Keep going, please."
Okay, yeah, we're just doing all the carbs at this point. This is butter, just full on butter. Mac and cheese starts off with a sauce mornay, which is just fancy French for cheese sauce. Sauce mornay. And sauce mornay is literally just bechamel with cheese melted into it. Bechamel is just flour thickened milk, essentially. The way that we're going to get to flour thickened milk is we are going to melt some butter. And as that melts, let's see. Oh, sorry. If I turn on the stove, that would help. Okay. We're going to start by creating a roux, which is just butter and flour. And we're going to cook the butter until the water content in the butter is gone. If we put the flour in right now, hopefully the steam. Okay. If we put the flour in right now, the melted water that's coming out of the butter will hydrate the flour. And we don't want that. So we're going to wait until all the bubbles leave, because those bubbles, the water turning into steam and cooking off.
I don't think that's another great tip there to to cook off the butter, that steam off. I
Yeah.
think I've done that.
Okay. Nice. So I don't hear the crackling anymore, right? And so this is pretty much at this point. Just listen a little bit more because I turned the power down. Yeah, this is essentially just browned milk proteins and fats. So I'm going to stick the flour in. I'm going to dump the flour in all at once and start stirring.
How high is your stove right now? Is that on a pretty high heat or?
I would say medium high.
Medium high, okay.
Medium high. Okay. It's okay if you get a little color. Technically, you shouldn't be getting any color onto this. I'm still learning on this induction stove, but okay. So this is essentially a roux. It's deep butter, fats, fried flour, essentially. Okay. And you can have the roux be perfectly white. I got a little bit of color on the milk proteins, and so mine has a little bit of color to it. But at this point, I've kind of cooked in the flour. The flour is completely coated by fat. So since the flour has absorbed the fat, it can't really absorb the water in the milk all that easily. So I won't get clumping. I'm going to start adding in the milk, little at a time. This could be cold milk. Mine just happens to be room temperature because it's been sitting there for a while. Okay.
Your pan is being admired. Do you have recommendations on pans?
So this is induction.
Okay.
So the pan has to be induction appropriate, but I am a fan of All Clad. Not being paid by them or anything like that, but All Clad is heavy. And so it will hold its heat very well. It's okay. All clad means it is clad in multiple layers of metal. So all clad pots and pans, they have several layers of metal, depending on if the pot or pan is built for sauteing or this just happens to be a rondeau. But some of them are designed to heat quickly and then hold heat. Some of them are designed to distribute the heat in a certain way, but in general, you can't go wrong with All Clad. If you're curious, All Clad also has an outlet online. I don't know, maybe I'll send Ken the link to it, but they have a lot of seconds. This is an All Clad second, which is like, it has minor imperfections.
I was asking if it was non-stick, but I don't think, it doesn't seem like it is, so correct?
No. So if you're up for non-stick, if you want non-stick stuff, I would advise you to go to a restaurant supply store and buy non-stick there. There's no reason for you to pay a lot for a non-stick pan because the non-stick coating will die at some point. So you don't want to spend like, several $100s on a non-stick pan only for it to die in like, a couple of years because somebody took a metal spatula to it.
Right.
So go to a restaurant supply store, get a nice aluminum pan that has a non-stick coating on it. For all of your, non-stick stuff.
A little earlier, I was asking, that's a great idea, because you kind of go through them. So I was asking about using, I can't believe it's not butter, which I'm gonna, I assume that's kind of like a margarine as well. Will that work for a roux or?
No, because
really
I can't believe it's not butter. It's again, oils, like vegetable oils and water. The proportion might be different than for butter. So for something like mac and cheese, go ahead and use tallow or lard. Also, you want like an actual fat, solid fat that's in there. You'll notice at this point that the liquid looks relatively thick. When this kind of thickness level, you achieve this type of thickness level, and I'm just going to get on a wooden spoon at this point. Okay, right? That's when you want to start melting the cheese in. So the idea is it coats the back of a spoon relatively well. This will probably get a little thicker. I'm going to add in salt. You can add in whatever other seasonings you want. Sometimes people like paprika or smoked paprika inside inside their mac and cheese. But this is essentially your bechamel. So if you're going to make lasagna or something like that, this is your bechamel. If you're making like an Alfredo sauce or some form of cheesy sauce, start sprinkling in your cheese. You don't want to pull the cheese directly from the refrigerator. You don't want the temperature difference too wide for your cheese right now. So just take the cheese. This is at room temperature and start stirring it in. So if you're looking for like a nacho cheese, a frou-frou nacho cheese sauce, this is how you would make the cheese sauce. This is what like Velveeta was trying to mimic, is all the pain that goes with making a sauce mornay.
It's gorgeous. I'll take a spoon, please. I think.
Like freaking bathe in this stuff.
Someone brought up a nut-based butter. Again, I sometimes, well, I'll let you answer that, but I know that there might be recipes online, but sometimes those substitutions just aren't kind of a one-for-one.
Yeah, it's not going to be a one-for-one, especially with nut butters then, because then like with nut butters, I'm thinking like sunflower butter or almond butters. I don't know. They have more nuts, nut fibers than fat in them.
Interesting.
I mean, it's unfortunately something like a sauce mornay, something like a mac and cheese. You're kind of committing yourself to fat and carb.
Someone asked a couple other questions. This is interesting. Can you use clarified butter? Is that kind of what you were doing when you're burning off the? Okay, so if you start with clarified butter, you're basically kind of that step ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, you can start with clarified butter. You can start off with ghee also, right? A little extra butter, right, isn't like butter fat isn't gonna make or break anything with your mac and cheese. So
in the recipe, it was noted the cheese, I believe it is in pounds. And is there a cup equivalent? About how many cups you're putting in? Someone else wrote in about 8 cups per pound, but I'm not sure if you knew.
I do not know off the top of my head, unfortunately. I would go by weight.
About weight, I haven't gotten it yet, but I'm going to be moving over to using a scale. And do you want to be an advocate for having a scale in your kitchen? Not for yourself, but for your ingredients.
Oh my God. So I have way too many scales, and scales are actually definitely the way to go, except, and this is the exception I'm going to throw in here, for stuff that's measured in teaspoons and tablespoons or so. And I say that because most scales that will take you up to the 5 to 10 pound range, they don't have the granularity or the precision that you're going to need to go down to single grams or ounces or something like that, or like fractions of an ounce. And so if a recipe calls for just say 5 grams of salt, the margin of error on your scale might actually be like 2 grams, which would be 50% more salt. Essentially 50% more salt than you really wanted. So for volumetric measurements of teaspoons and tablespoons, I say, go ahead and keep those. But otherwise, by weight would be preferable for any baking that you're doing. For something like mac and cheese, it's super forgiving. So, if you're at 1.5 pounds of cheese, it'll be just fine. You will be just fine.
It sounds like we can use the clarified butter in this application. Someone was asking about using it in the biscuits and the pie dough, but for that, I believe you want the whole butter, right? Because it wants to be very cold and solid.
Yeah, so if you've clarified butter, you can then go ahead and freeze it and use it like that. But then, but something, Honestly, I'm gonna say no to that also on second thought, because you do want the water content in that butter,
Okay.
because that's gonna help you give some of the rise too, because as the biscuit bakes, yes,
All right.
the steam helps to raise everything. Okay, and I already par cooked the macaroni. You can use penne if you wanted to, and literally just stir it in here. This is super cheesy. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and take it off the stove. You can serve it just like this. This just happens to be very, very cheesy. If you're going to bake it afterwards, you can add a little bit more water to thin down the sauce, because as you bake, the pasta is going to suck in more of that liquid. And if you like a very saucy mac and cheese, go ahead and add a little bit more liquid to it. And
that pasta was cooked, correct?
Yeah,
the
pasta was already cooked. Okay, I'm going to take this back to the main camera now. And so let's see. So I'm just going to take a generous sized baking dish, and you can prep this ahead of time also. And I'm just going to go ahead and pour mac and cheese into here.
Asking about adding things in. They're asking about vegetables to make it kind of hearty, but is what still in the before you put it in this the time to
so actually inside the big pot here, right? If I plan on putting this inside the oven, I would probably cut up like little florets of broccoli and stick it into here. Okay. Peas work really well. The old school tuna casserole, right? You can stir in a can or two of tuna into that as well. Oh my God, public of the American public school system here, we had mac and cheese and little smokies. So the little hot dog sausage type thingies, you can stir those into here also. That's like my childhood right there. Mac and cheese and little smokies was like my favorite school day. I'm putting in breadcrumbs, just a generous amount of breadcrumbs up top. And then you can also layer on more cheese on top of this. At this point, right, if you sprinkled the cheese onto it, you can literally let this cool down a little bit and then wrap it up, stick it inside your freezer. And then when you're ready to bake it, let it defrost on the counter for a couple of hours, and then go ahead and stick it inside the oven and reheat it, say at 325. Or you can stick a probe thermometer in there and reheat it up until 170. And then you're good to go.
These all sound particularly great for holiday baking, because everything you've said can be prepared in advance and then put that out or bake them off as your guests arrive, when you've got your glass of wine handy.
Yes,
so very easy. That stress out. Oh my goodness. Come on.
Pecan pie at this point. Just so I don't burn my countertop here. So pecan pie right there. Yay!
That's a beauty.
Yeah, it's gonna be a little liquidy on the inside, but it will set as it cools further. So yeah, all the carbs for your holiday.
Someone was asking about, did you need to grease your pan before you put the mac and cheese mixture in it?
No.
Okay.
No. There's enough fat inside the mac and cheese where it'll just pull from the glass. Yeah. What happens if you cut the pie too soon? Don't cut the pie too soon. let it cool, because you're not going to be able to eat this right now. Anyways, it is going to like burn your entire mouth and like esophagus. So wait for it to cool. When in doubt, you can always just get a probe thermometer, right? And Tyler, good to see you. Where you used to work, I am sure you got customers who are asking for specific temperatures, right? And so 140 is probably the very upper limit of what your mouth is willing to tolerate. So, so get a probe thermometer. This is probably way above 2 right now.
Letting things cool. And I'm trying to remember where I learned this in all the cooking shows I watch, which are many, is that time is an ingredient.
Yes.
Both in how long you let something cook and letting something cool. And that, there's just no way to patience and
all the sugars in this are pretty
Yeah.
molten right now. So if I cut into it right now, like it's just going to blow off. It'll liquefy in front of me. But once it gets to about like 140, it'll still feel nice and warm, right? Your ice cream will still melt and cool on top of your pie at about 140. But at about 140, you can probably eat it. But it's best if you like let it sit overnight and then eat it the next morning or so.
Did you season?
Same thing with lemon meringue.
Did you season the breadcrumbs? That on the
I did not. You can.
Okay.
And so this was literally leftover baguette that I tore into about dime-sized pieces and then toasted inside the oven at like 375 just to dry it out, get a little bit of color on it. And then I took a mortar and pestle and just like beat the crap out of it and turn it into breadcrumbs.
Yeah. When people are loving your oven mitts, so those hens are fantastic.
These were gifts.
Very good. And then they were asking me how to bake the biscuit. So on the baking sheet, is there a silicone liner, parchment paper? What's the method?
Parchment paper on a baking sheet is fine. Silicone baking mat is fine. They both work really, really well. Yeah, don't put them directly onto a pan. They might bake a little too quickly. So even a simple layer of parchment paper will even up the baking time. And I'll just show you right now. This is with the silicone baking mat. Like the bottoms, even with the silicone baking mat, get darker than the tops will. So if you put it directly onto a pan, the bottom will cook even more quickly than this. So yeah.
The mac and cheese, if you freeze it, then bake it, to what was the internal temperature? You mentioned an internal temperature. What was that?
About 170.
170. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. And 325 is just gentle enough where the top won't completely brown by the time the inside comes up to temperature.
Yes, the show is being taped. We'll get that up as soon as we can. We'll get that. Any other, you know what, you are such a trooper always. I mean, what an amazing meal. We've got people who are, I think, prepared. They're going to start the baking, and then it looks like there'll be some nap taking after they're done eating, which is perfect for the holidays and for this cold weather. Warm up that oven and cook. Any final thing you want to let us know, as we thank you so much for this evening. This was really fantastic. It always is fantastic, but now I'm even
share your creations. I don't know if there's like a hashtag that you guys have, but I would love to see if you guys make any of this stuff and how it comes out. People usually come up with such awesome substitutions, right? Because you all have cooked with the ingredients that you're used to cooking. So I would love to see what you guys have made. And I'm sure Nicole and her team would love to see that too.
Oh, great. Well, that's a great idea. We can, an email will go out. And so when people are making these, we'd love to see those. I think I really like this idea of a hashtag. And we've seen some other suggestions, maybe starting these a little bit later when they're live, give people a chance to go home. We'll consider that as well. And everybody is just saying thank you. These were really great tips, and like I said, I watch a lot of cooking shows, and you've taught me many new things, so I really appreciate it as you're just an amazing faculty member, amazing member of the SF State community, and a great gator, and we really appreciate it. So everyone out there, thank you so much for joining us on this day. We are really so hopeful that you're going to have a fantastic rest of the 2022 as we head into 2023. Join us again. Again, I believe that was January 18th. Am I saying that correctly? I'd have to look back at my notes. And for our next event, which is on January 18th for Lunar New Year, where you're going to be taking us through pork buns and sticky rice. So by the way, that is already a very hot show. We made kind of a save the date and people were like signing up left and right. So happy holidays to everybody. Go Gators. It was a thrill to see everyone. Thank you, Sybil. Happy holidays to you.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.